So hello, welcome to the museum Kunsthalle Weishaupt in Ulm. I'm proud to present so far one of my biggest presentation of my work. It covers a period about 35 years of my work, and it starts with very early works from the late 80s until really the latest work from 2024. Here in this first section you can see the beginning of the discussion between painting and object. In that period my sentence about structure of painting, that every painting is also an object, was the starting point of the research about color and material. The first shapes were made in plywood, found objects, steel, and I discovered the relation between inside and outside of the object, and the relation between surface and ground. Follows after this works, cuts. It was, I call it the foldings. So how come is related a painting, a form in front of a wall? It's definitely creates a space. It has a format, and my research was how can be the expressive form related to the architectural structure of the plain wall. And the easiest way to create space was a kind of folding. The format, which is a decision of space, which is a declaration on the white wall of an expressive form, but it's also the possibility of coming into the three-dimensional space. And I cut the format and put the two parts in a different position. So it's called folding. At the end it's a volume which comes slightly in front of the wall. And the interaction between a bright color, the white wall, and the distance to the real space give the first idea of an object which is different in perception from different angles you look at it. So the clear form, which is supposed to be a square or another not rectangle format, is now visible from different perspectives, from different sides, and it's changed completely the impression of the position of the structure on the wall, and it makes the flat form to an object. So the main question about, for me, as painting as an object was reduced to a very thin carrier of paint and the position to the wall. So I tried different scales. It was also interesting to discover how these expressive forms interfere with each other. And in that period, I also had a big project in Vienna Art Museum, Palais Liechtenstein, where my work supposed to be exposed in a historical room, Herkules Saal. And I had the idea to bring my shapes, my forms to the floor. So in a reaction to the painting on the ceiling was my painting my composition from so-called islands on the floor. And this is one of these works, which is also relating to the period of the foldings. In the beginning of the 90s, I made a lot of experience with found objects, with already painted materials, which I transformed. I loved the idea of using cheap materials. And the research was about the relation between in and out. And so defining a format means create and define a space at the wall and in the space, the room, basically. And I made a big installation with these called windows, which are objects, like reminding to a window because it's an open space. You can look through it and you have a relation between inside, outside. It's a play with a frame, what you catch, which part of the space you catch in this frame, but also the expressive outlet here gives the quality of a sculpture and more or less taking the space. So it was an installation with 5 windows. Here we can see 3 of them, and it was important for me to balance between this idea of catching a picture in a frame, which has a long tradition since Renaissance, since the early discussion of having opened the painting to a space, until the 20th century, where the discussion of inside, outside, the format, shaped canvas was a continuous subject. So for me, I also tried to discover structures, dynamic structures in two-dimensional way and graphic, and I liked to draw at that time with big formats of black oil paint, very intense black and white. And here's a group of drawings which are the same time like these windows, and you can see that there are already a lot of structure of composition in the space are more or less to find. It's a series. I like to work in series, and it was also the experience of expression, to be really to define the form in a more or less expressive way, setting the volume and not calculating in a way or measuring, because it was clear I was on the way to very clear geometrical forms, but the possibility of discovering with black and white, with like China ink, it's a process, and I liked also this idea of finding these forms in a process of time and expressing. Over the years, I refined the question about how is an object related, a monochrome object, a painted format related to the wall. It was a discussion how you have paint one thing and you have a carrier. How is this relation? And there was a lot of structures, ideas which give this object a body and a definition. I decided to work in steel because it was a convenient material for me, very precisely to work with that. Also very thin, so the flatness of an object could be possible. On the other side, I like the material. It has a specific character, and I like this contrast between soft and hard, between bending and really being straight, sharp on the wall. So there were a lot of work which defined the body. I decided to have also a volume that you really see the material, that you can see the object is made out of steel. It shows the character of the material, and on the other side the painting, the flatness of the color, a specific rolled, very matte color, which gives a presence of volume, of color. So the relation between these two parts was discovered in many objects. And I decided at one point that the entity, the closed form of an object has not the possibilities to interfere so dynamic with the space as I wanted. I was the feeling I wanted to have a structure that is more related between inside, outside, and also the definition of size and form of the object has to do with the inside structure, and I would say the idea of giving the object a structure in terms of a composition was the idea to cut the thing again in parts and rearrange it in a different way. And so I started to cut in different parts one object and ordered the parts in a different way. So we see here a couple of works are from the beginning of the 2000, where already a kind of perspective form is integrated. I call this group Plaza. It reminds an architectural structure. I like the idea to play around with cubes, but the cubes are not in a sculptural way, so more in a like organizing cubes on a map, or maybe in a view from on top of a city. So this is the one possibility. The other was the tower, also a figure, a subject which I'm still very interested in, the idea of a solid volume, a tower that reminds also an architecture structure. But it's something which is now related to the wall. I more or less took one corner of the tower and hanged it on the wall. So this is an example from this period, 2005, where we can see this is a structure which is divided in 4 parts. It gives more or less a grid for the whole form, and you can follow the idea of something which is related to volume, but on the other side it's just a kind of corner situation, or it's architectural reflex. But there already started the idea of perspective lines, of a structure which gives the format a different touch, a different meaning. And it was already in the very early works that if you work with a diagonal form, then always implies the movement of into the space and into a kind of perspective construction. This is also maybe our perception of discovering the form and orientation. So I was at that point that I had to decide if I admit perspective construction, perspective ideas of a format, or I really break with that, because the tradition of the concrete Kunst, constructive Kunst was always very clear, excluding this moment of perspective, which implies a kind of optical illusion. And of course there was the tragedies in the 70s of the op art, but so far I came to this point that I had to decide how I deal with that. And I decided, okay, let's admit it. And this was the moment when really the side part of the object, the part where you see the metal, grinded metal, the material, this was the moment to decide, okay, I have a special angle, I have a special position to the wall, and that gives a kind of perspective idea of the object. And on the other side, it was interesting to see with this step of bending the side, the meaning of the shadow of the object changed completely, because our perception of reading something three-dimensional is also related to the light. Where's the light coming from? Which is the shadow, which gives us an orientation about how deep is something, how we want to see it in a object in the space related to my own body. And here suddenly the shadow of the work is more or less in the side part, that you don't have a specific shadow which gives you a clear answer of how deep is this object. And this was interesting to see that the relation between wall, object, light, position of the viewer, this is a very complex relation, and it's always to play around with that. So then, beginning of the 2010 years, I started to work with these dynamic structures, having perspective construction, a kind of vanishing point, that the object is related to the space and to the position of the viewer. So it's one side is something which is able to calculate. There is mathematical construction possibilities, but on the other hand, it was always important for me to verify the quality of an idea in front of the object on the wall. So beside all ideas of including perspective, it was always and is still the moment when the work itself appears on the wall, to really decide, is this the right angle, is this the right expressive form, is this also in relation to me, is it the right position and dimension. And here we are now in the part of the exhibition, and you see works from the last 10 years. And you see that these forms are following different structures. You have the beams, you have really a kind of group of formats which follow an invisible structure to some exterior points, so gives a dynamic structure. Or you have, I call it the window. That means the format is divided in 4 parts, and you have a structure inside, outside. It's a cross. It could be a rectangular shadow from a window. Well, this is something which is shows the different possibilities and how to structure one form. And of course, now we have here in this fantastic architecture the possibility to see a work which I created in 2019 for the Bocconi University in Milano. It's a specific designed object for this wall there, but it was important for me to show also this work here, because it's a work which has a dimension which is over the normal measurements, and it gives the possibility to discover really some of my very important principles, that you discover your things by moving around, and the perception is a mosaic, is a group of impressions what you get while you are moving in front of an object. So that means a really defined meaning of an object is only possible if you have different angles, different ideas from one of the same thing. And here you can see that basically it's a clear structure. It's a kind of folding, and you see on one side the material, how it's made of. It's an aluminum structure. It's like folded flat sheets of aluminum, and on the other side you have a really clear blue space which guides you in another direction. And I'm very happy that it was possible to show this work here, because it's first of all, it's interesting to see in the space here in this fantastic room. It's very well designed for this type of works, a very clear architecture which gives every work the optimized situation of light and shape of the wall. And it's interesting to see these different scales of work, how they interfere to each other. And especially here in this last section, we can see one of the my biggest work for wall here from the collection, Jutta and Siegfried Weishaupt in Ulm, which is the founder of this Kunsthalle. And I'm happy to be presented with a couple of works here in this collection. And this is one of his works, and I'm very proud that we can show it here. And for this show, I also created a special work for this enormous wall in the front, like a little bit like a picture, like a framed passepartout. It's the possibility to present the work, but it's interesting to have the distance, and one side is distance, on the other side it's very present with the other two works here, with the yellow, with the blue, and with the red form. Let me tell you about these round forms. Of course, I was always related to the geometrical, clear, rectangle-shaped forms, but in the discussion about perspective, of course, the circle as a basic form transforms into ellipse. That was the idea, how I can present also this round forms, these volumes. And it's a group of works called Orbit. Orbit, that's okay, it's a little bit association to movement in the space and floating in the space. But it's the same principle. You have a body, you have a volume, and you have a kind of material part where you see a gray form which reminds on the shadow that something is floating on the wall. And so here in this first big section of the exhibition, I have really the focus on, first of all, a scale, a discussion between my measures and the measure of architecture and the measure of the work itself. I can really discover the movement around the object, how it transforms really the impression of the object and gives a different possibility of interpretation. Is it a shifted object? Is it something which is used to be a unique form, which is now, because of dynamics, it's spread out in the space? Or is it a clear structure which provokes you to walk around and reminds you on architectural structures? Or is it something which is like floating in the space, something which is free from a kind of constructivism like this Orbit works? So, yeah, with this show I'm really able to present a big range of my works from the last 35 years. It was really a pleasure to work with this team here, especially with the director, Mrs. Weishaupt. It was very productive, the curating of the show, because we are very clear in the positions, and I think we made a great selection of works, and I'm hoping that you will discover these exhibition and come soon to Ulm. Thank you very much.